Let's start with you, Cavan. Tell people about your project.
So as I mentioned, I'm here with a short psychological horror film called Through the Throat. It is a film that follows unhappily middle-aged Janine as she's dealing with an internal demon in the fallout of a breakup that starts to become frighteningly real and palpable in her life. It's best way of describing it is it's a film we did not make during the pandemic, but is absolutely my pandemic film. It very much touches on a lot of ideas about, sort of the universality of the experience of, depression and isolation that, basically all of us in one way or another were going through for those, 2.5 years that we were dealing with, and that I saw in, all my loved ones and my friends as well, where it's like you're seeing isolation and depression being almost more infectious and more virulent than the actual disease that all of us are trying to keep from getting.
Sure.
I hope that doesn't sound too flippant about how serious COVID is and was, but the thing was, I thankfully was very lucky. Nobody I knew got seriously sick with COVID during that time, but everybody I knew was dealing with situational depression and was dealing with isolation, and some of us were dealing with it very badly.
Yeah.
So I was trying to reckon with that in this film, which tackles, a breakup and vampires.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's an interesting movie because it definitely goes through a series of ideas along the way. It starts out with this kind of, like you were saying, depression. I thought like a self-hatred almost, and into being about a breakup and dealing with that. Then there's vampires, and there's a voice in her head, and there's a lot of different things. I also thought at one point it was going to be about a voice box, from the title Through the Throat. That's what I thought was going to be heading towards, and it was but it went in the supernatural direction. But yeah, maybe talk a little about the mixture of ideas that kind of went into this.
Well, beyond the whole cauldron of what we were dealing with during COVID, when I started really thinking about what I wanted to touch on and how to even make a film, because we shot this in 2022, and there was a real debate, particularly between myself and my editing partner and my lead actress, about how do you even make a film about the pandemic now? Because you can't, in 2022 you could not make, I would argue, a film literally about the pandemic because it is so close and so raw. So you need to find a way to create that sort of emotional and narrative distance. And so I started thinking about all these things, and I realized the story I was really interested in telling was about the way that we create monsters when we turn all of those sort of virulent, infectious things like depression, like isolation, disappointment in one's life, or self-hatred, as you alluded to, and the monsters that we create when we turn those inward.
Turn them in on yourself.
And when I realized that this was going to be a very internal kind of film that was going to have a limited number of locations and only, in essence, one actress on screen, who inevitably kind of ends up playing two characters.
Sure.
by the back nine, but I realized that it gave a lot of room to cycle through, I think, a bunch of sort of related, sort of emotional terrors that, not to harp on it, but that we were all dealing with during the pandemic, but also I think things that we just all have to deal with as we get older,
No, absolutely. So obviously the pandemic is an influence, by any movies that were, major influences for you with this?
Oh, that's a good question. 2 years since I had to think about that terribly much.
Right.
Probably.
Pieces.
Yeah. I should have thought about my own puzzle pieces. I'm so unprepared.
Yeah.
I don't really think there were any direct links or anything that I was directly pointing to, I want to reference this. Mm-hmm. I think there was fundamentally a lot of sort of emotional references that I was trying to capture. Primarily from two filmmakers that I've already mentioned, which is Ari Aster and Jennifer Kent, who I find to be two of the most interesting contemporary horror filmmakers working right now, who are, I think in all cases of all of their films, trying to find these interesting ways of using the visual and narrative idiom of horror to talk about real life and to talk about things that all of us are kind of dealing with.
Yeah.
And I think the main sort of influence that came from those films, and I like rewatched Hereditary and The Babadook and Midsommar in the lead up to putting together my shot list for the film, but was to try and think about like, okay, I don't want to necessarily make a film that's going to look like any of these films, or it's going to be edited in that way, but how are these filmmakers, how are these storytellers talking about reality through the lens of horror?
Yeah.
And then what can that say about the way I'm trying to do it in, a different environment and obviously with a different palette of characters?
The person that I thought of actually was Darren Aronofsky. I was thinking of that kind of trilogy of The Wrestler, Black Swan, and The Whale, of these people who are just kind of inwardly destroying themselves.
Oh, interesting.
So that's what I kind of came away with.
I love it. I'm a big fan of Aronofsky. I was completely not thinking of any of his films when I put it together, though.
I get it.
But I don't know. It's always kind of fun when you find the subconscious sort of influences that were maybe sitting there, and that's why I love seeing it with an audience, because people see influences that you yourself as the filmmaker didn't have.
Absolutely.
And that you're not even in charge of defining. There is no reason to say that yours is any less the right answer than mine because you detected Aronofsky.
There you go.
It obviously means there's something of it there, So that's fun. I like it.
Right on. Well,